Here's the sitch on the ATL box score today. We get into some National Signing Day talk at the beginning of the show. And then we have Ned Kaish on to give a conference by conference breakdown in college basketball. You're listening to the ATL Box Score podcast with Alex Berger, and this is Pro Style Wednesday. Now, you guys might be wondering, how does a podcast that just recently started, what do I use for recording space? Well, I actually use a place called Spaces, and I go to the center that's Spaces Midtown East, and I use their resources that they have here to create my podcast and to put it out there to the world and to do other business-related things, and it's pretty much my home base to grow my business and my product that I'm developing for you guys. And if you want to check it out, I have Steve Choi with me, who is one of the regional managers who manages a lot of different centers, also with Spaces and the Regis brand, to tell you more about Spaces Midtown East.
Hey, thanks, Alex, for inviting me on the show. We love having you as well as ATL Box Score with us here at Spaces. I want to invite anybody, all your listeners, to come in and take a test drive. Let us know that Alex sent you. We'll give you a free 5-day test drive to Spaces, which is a hybrid, collaborative, and private workspace location. We're all over the world, particularly here in Atlanta. We have 5 locations, and we'll be opening 2 more soon here. So I am the area manager. Come on in. We offer private offices as well as 8,000 square feet of collaborative space for our members to come in and check it and just be productive. So again, come on in. Let us know that Alex sent you and the ATL Box Score, and we'll go ahead and set you up for 5 days free.
Well, thank you, Steve. Definitely appreciate you. Definitely appreciate your friendly staff for helping me out and giving me all the resources I need to be successful. If you want to know more about Spaces Midtown, they are just a block north from the Fox Theater. I know all you guys know where the Fox Theater is. They're just a block north from the Fox Theater, and I'm going to put the website in the show description, so you have no excuses if you're like me, trying to start your own business or your own brand. Check out Spaces Midtown East. Yesterday, that moment happened when you see Hank Aaron's name. Hank Aaron, if I'm dating some people, which I probably will because, I try to have this show reach out to the younger generation. Hank Aaron, and I can't believe I'm saying this right now if you don't know who Hank Aaron is, but I think I should just clear the air. Hank Aaron is a baseball legend that he was the man that broke Babe Ruth's home run record, and he did it right here. He did it like 5-6 minutes from where we're recording right now.
That's awesome.
He broke the home run record. Then Barry Bonds later broke the home run record, which maybe they're going to take that back and it's still going to be Hank. So who knows what happens with that? I'll just put it that way. But I see Hank Aaron's name trending on Twitter. And I'm nervous. I'm wondering what's going on with Hank Aaron.
Yeah.
By the way, he's the hardest autograph. I've heard he's the hardest autograph to get out of all the sports figures to come out of Atlanta.
Really?
Yeah, he's the hardest hardest autograph to get.
Makes sense.
But anyways, I click on it. I'm nervous. He's an old guy. And I'm thinking something else is going to happen. Then I click on it. And yesterday was his 85th birthday.
Damn. That's awesome, man.
So it made me nervous because I thought the guy was gonna the guy passed on and everything like that.
Trending. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and it was trending and everything like that. So, but luckily with ATL Box Score, I did a bunch of retweets, got some likes on those retweets, and it was one of those relief moments.
Hank Aaron was the man.
Yeah, he was.
I didn't even really follow his career, of course.
Right, because it was back in the 70s.
Right.
In the 60s and 50s.
I always see that clip of when he broke the record and those guys stormed the field to run with him.
Right, yeah.
That was awesome, man. I mean, I was
the home run king is Henry Aaron.
That's so awesome.
Look it up on YouTube, guys. It's pretty cool.
Pretty special.
But I'm glad to hear that Mr. Aaron is Mr. Aaron is doing fine.
Yeah.
That there's no problem
now too. I mean, he's still a great ambassador.
He's a very candid guy. He's not one of these people that tries to be outspoken or tries to impress you with what he did or anything like that. He's another one of those guys that came from a different generation.
Exactly.
But just to give you the rundown of the show, and in case you're wondering what you're listening to right now, this is the ATL Box Score podcast. This is Atlanta's newest sports podcast. And if you're tired of regular sports talk radio, you want to take a break from it, well, you're in the right place, my friend, because we try to tailor our show around sports talk radio, but at the same time we have more in-depth conversations. And the great thing about podcasts too, it's on a on-demand platform. So usually we talk NBA talk at the beginning of the week, towards the end of the week. Even though we didn't do it this year, we talked more about the Super Bowl and what happened there. But at the middle, we talk college basketball, so that's what we're going to get into today, even though it's National Signing Day. And then at the end of the week, which is one of my favorite shows, even though all these shows are fun and I like doing all of them, but we have Football Friday. So we're going to get
Wait. It's also a very special episode. Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't Friday mark your 100th show, 100th podcast?
It does, actually.
Wow. Congrats, buddy.
Thank
I'll bring
you.
something special for you.
Thank you. Get those gold balloons that say 100 on them. Or we could try to get the Domino's pizza order right.
Let's do that. let's. You know what? That is what we are going to do for a very special Football Friday. We are going to get that dang Domino's pizza order correct.
So anyways, in case you're wondering who I am, I'm Alex Berger, and joining me with that other voice, that's Steve Choi. And today's Pro Style Wednesday, at least we call it Pro Style Wednesday around here. We're kind of like Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll, when he was at USC, I don't know if he does this in Seattle. I was drawing a blank on that name. But I don't know if he does this in Seattle. But every practice throughout the week had a certain name, and that's how we operate here on the ATL Box Score. We have Recapping the Weekend, which is talking all about what happened during the weekend and where we deem to have on the show. Then we have Pro Style Wednesday, which I just like the name Pro Style. I think that's cool. Don't you think Pro Style is a cool name?
That's very cool. It makes me think of skaters.
Skaters?
Like skateboarders from back in the day. Pro Style.
Interesting. Okay. I'm more going off Pro Style offense.
Yeah, so you're a football guy. I'm from Cali. I'm a skater guy. So yeah. No, it sounds good. I mean, it's an awesome name, buddy.
Yeah. So we are going to get into some National Signing Day talk. We also have Ned Kaish on the show today to break down all the college basketball action. A lot of big upsets last night. So, and by the way, we are recording this on a Wednesday. So if you're listening on a Thursday, Friday, maybe next week, for example, the sports climate might have changed, and you might think this is old information. And unfortunately, this is one of the things we're trying to master here at ATL Box Score, how to keep things current and fresh and everything like that. So if you think we're a little bit outdated, well, you probably listened to this a little bit outdated. So, but yeah, next we're going to get into National Signing Day, and just to talk about what's the goings on with National Signing Day and where we're at right now. So today is National Signing Day and National Letter of Intent Day. It's also known as that. And pretty much, if you don't know what that is, this is the day where if you haven't signed already back in December, because there's 2 signing periods where you can sign your national letter of intent that you're planning to receive a scholarship from Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Notre Dame, wherever. This day is huge. It used to be the biggest day for a Texas newspaper since Texas is extremely competitive in high school football, and it's a sea of Division I prospects, that it was like overload for a Texas paper. Now the state of Georgia, and the reason why this is big, the reason why we're talking about it, the state of Georgia, especially the Atlanta metro area, is kind of that same way, where it's D1 prospects galore. No matter where you came out of, no matter what high school is, no matter what record. Like I know guys that were on a 3-9 football team and they got a Division I prospect, or they got a Division I scholarship. So that's just the talent level in this state, that you can have a crappy year, a crappy record, but somehow your guys are getting looked at by Division I schools. So, from a college football standpoint, if you're a college football fan, like you're always wondering how do you measure up? What's the basis on? How do you stack up? Well, they have rankings, and we're going to get into those rankings in a minute, just to give you the overall scheme of what's going on. We're also going to have Donovan James on our Friday show, our Football Friday show, and he's going to break it down more for us. I'm just going to give you just a general overview of what's going on in Georgia, giving you some class rankings. And we're going to do it from 24/7 Sports. I'm kind of veering away from ESPN.com because they kind of explain who has 5 stars, who has 4 stars, and this is the and each recruit has a ranking of a 1 to 5-star recruit, and obviously the team that has a bunch of 4 stars, the team that has a bunch of 5-star guys, well, they're always the teams that are successful, like Alabama, for example. But when you get on campus, the star system kind of doesn't matter to some people, and it's the great debate of do 5 stars pan out, or 5 stars a guarantee? Well, there's nothing guaranteed in life, but that's the great debate. But this is how you kind of judge people on, and this is the indicator where guys are potentially at. It could change. Now let's get into some class rankings. You have Alabama at number 1. You have Georgia at number 2. You have Texas at number 3. You have Texas A&M at number 4. You have Oklahoma at number 5. LSU rounds out number 6. Oregon is at number 7. Michigan's at 8. Clemson's at 9. Penn State's at 10. Florida is at 11. Tennessee's at 14. Auburn's at 15. And South Carolina is at 21. Ole Miss is at 26. And that pretty much rounds it all out there. That I'm surprised with this, that Clemson is at number 9, coming off the national championship. It's a little surprising to me, especially knowing the history of Dabo Swinney, the way he recruits, the way that he really gets after. I would think that he would be in the top 5 somewhere, but he's actually at the bottom of the top 10. Now, Florida is gaining some traction. They're at a number 11, and I've kind of saw this coming with the Gators, especially having Denton Mullen. By the way, too, Notre Dame is at number 12, in case you're curious, too, because they're going to be playing Georgia this year in Sanford Stadium. So just throwing that out there, too. If there's anyone that could probably move up in this at the end of the day, because this is all going to change, guys. We're recording this at 1:20 on a Wednesday. So this is all, not I'm going to say not all of it's going to change, but a lot of it might change, especially in the top 10 by when business hours are over. So, but the thing that's not going to change, and I don't see this happening, is where Georgia and Alabama are right now. Because the reason why I go to this 24/7 sports composite rankings of classes is because they give you a little bit more extra. They have a point system. Like right now, Georgia is at a 3.8.28. Texas is at 287.2. Now that's a big difference. That's a couple hundred off. Or 100. That's 100 that kind of separates you there. I'm not a math guy, so so please don't come down on me. Hopefully you can show some grace. But there's a difference right there. That kind of tips the scale. The only thing that's separating Georgia from Alabama is 14 points. So, but Georgia and Alabama are going to finish ahead of everyone else. Having a 1,300 score or above, you're going to win a national championship doing that. At least teams in the past that have scored that number with a recruiting class, that class went on to win a national championship. So Georgia, Alabama right now are pretty close. We might see another national championship rematch coming down the road just based on recruiting. Now, some people say you can't really hang your hat on recruiting classes and rankings and everything like that. But it's kind of showing, though, that teams that have stayed in the top 3 usually 90% of the time win national championships. Granted, Florida State, I feel like, is the only case in point where they only won national championship, because back when Jimbo was there, they would always land in that top 2, top 3, top 4. They were, at one time, they were at the number 1 spot. They would always land in the top 3. And it took them till 2014 to win a national championship. So these rankings, in my opinion, do mean a lot and do have indicators of what national championship, at least playoff teams, are going to look like in the future going forward. But to get into some Georgia, though, talk, Georgia is waiting on a couple of guys, and they and I feel like with these guys that they're waiting on to see if they're going to get signed, and just to put a scenario out there too, the only way Georgia is going to move up on this list is unless Alabama loses a couple of recruits. But I just don't see that happening. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to be Alabama 1, Georgia 2, and then whatever shuffling happens after that is how I feel like this thing is. But there's a tight end out of Florida, out of Clearwater, Florida, named Ben Stetson, who I feel like would be would be good for Georgia to get if they could. The only knock on him, they say he hasn't played varsity football until 2017. I don't feel like that's a big deal necessarily. The thing I see from him is that the guy's tall, which is an advantage. He's just not big. He's not big like you would see a typical tight end from the SEC. But a year in the weight room at Georgia, that'll change you. So that's the only knock on him right now for where he's at right now. The future, I feel like, is bright for this kid. And it would be huge to get a signee like that. That's at 1:30, so by the time we get off the air, we're going to know if that guy signed or not. Also, Javon Shepard out of Houston, Texas, would also be a huge pickup for the Dogs if they can get him. That just puts more depth on the O-line and what Sam Pittman is trying to do there. So that both of those guys, I feel like, is something that Georgia needs going forward. But also, too, in the free agent market that is college football, because that's pretty much what this transfer portal is. Try saying transfer portal 5 times fast. But the free agent market that is college football, you have a huge pickup if Georgia can get this guy. And I feel like this is one of the needs that Georgia needs going forward, especially on the offensive side of the ball. That if you could get Eli Wolff from Tennessee, and by the way, maybe this just says where Tennessee's at right now. This dude was the best player on Tennessee's team. Hands down. But this guy would be great. He would be like Isaac Nada. He could carry out what Isaac Nada did for Georgia last year. And with James Coley's system, they're going to rely on the tight end more than they have. So this would be a huge pickup for the Dogs if they can get Eli Wolff. I know I'm sounding like the president saying huge a lot. That's my catchphrase for the day, is that huge word. But I know a lot of people can't be really excited about National Signing Day, especially if you only watch college football when it's on. But still, it's kind of like college football's back for a minute. You get to see what's going on and who these teams pick up. So Brett Stetson is going to, by the time we get off the air, he should make his decision. Same with Javon Stetson. So that Shepard, my bad. I don't know why I said that. Shepard, yeah, Javon Shepard. I really screwed that one up. But Javon Shepard, his commitment was at 1 o'clock. So we're about to see how this all unfolds. This is what college football. This is what college football is all about. Seeing that you just go through a process of where you get to choose where you want to go to school, and it's always funny to see the type of tactics and the things that schools try to persuade you to go to their school. But that's just the nature of college athletics, and it's a fun thing. It's kind of like trading on Wall Street, sort of, or seeing where seeing who's interested in your stock. I'll just put it that way. So it's to me this is always fun to see if your football team's going to stay the same or it's going to get better. Now going from the future of college football to currently what's going on in college basketball, we have Ned Kaish joining the show, and we're going to give you a conference-by-conference breakdown, especially the conferences that are relevant to this area of the country. This is my conversation with Ned Kaish. Hope you enjoy. Well, now we just want to bring on to the conversation Mr. Ned Kaish, who we talk about college basketball just about every week now with him, and just giving you the landscape of what's going on in college basketball. Ned, how are you doing today, man?
Doing well. Another good Wednesday. Hopping on the phone with you, talking college hoops. Can't complain. Had some big upsets last night. I know we'll talk about them, and got a big Saturday coming up. So definitely good time to be transitioning from football over to college basketball.
Yeah. Now,
especially after that boring Super Bowl.
I guess you're not a fan of defense then, so I'll just put it that way.
I guess not. I can appreciate a good game plan, but come on, give me something besides some punts.
I gotcha. Wanted to see a little bit more fireworks there. But you had Michigan State go down, Kansas and Marquette all in the same night. Just because usually, like, with those Tuesday, Wednesday games, they pretty much go to script. You usually don't get a lot of big upsets, but last night you had a couple of them.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, like I said, there's a huge weekend of college basketball coming up, and I think sometimes these midweek games, they're look-aheads, especially for younger teams, who may not be experienced in being able to handle game by game. Just kind of looking at Michigan State first. I mean, theirs isn't so much a look-ahead. They're playing Minnesota Saturday, but, they got blown out pretty good by Illinois. It ended up being a 7 or 8 point game, but Illinois was up, double digits for most of that game. Obviously, it's always tough to play on the road, but Michigan State is a team that A lot of people thought it was a Final Four team, and for them to lose that game, I think raises a lot of questions. Now, they lost Josh Langford for the year, and that hurts. He's a stud guard. But they still have plenty of good players. Cassius Winston is a stud point guard, but I think he had like 9 turnovers last night. So 9 turnovers on the road, it's really going to be tough to win. So that was tough for Michigan State. Marquette lost at home to St. John's. Marquette's ranked number 10. That was surprising. That was another game where St. John's was up a lot of the game. Marquette took the lead late with like 30 seconds left, and then Shamari Pons, who's St. John's stud, had a layup with 10 seconds left to win that game. He finished with 28 points. He was 9-9 from the free throw line. St. John's has beat Marquette twice this year, which I think is huge for St. John's. They've kind of been inconsistent, but with a guy like Pons for St. John's, they can win almost any game. Marquette's got a huge chance to bounce back on Saturday when they play Villanova. But Kansas, I think, is kind of the most surprising. Kansas has won 14 straight Big 12 regular season titles, and they're 6-4 in the league right now. Lost to their rival Kansas State. So we'll see what happens with Kansas. They got really killed by injuries. Their big man Azubuike's out. I think one of the other forwards got hurt last week. So Kansas really has to put it together if they want to win that Big 12 again. They're a young team, but they've got plenty of talent.
Do you feel like it's safe to say that Kansas is in a rebuilding year, or was this just unexpected?
I think it's just unexpected. I think the injuries that got them were some of their older guys, which they were going to rely on to mentor some of their younger guys. So, now some of the younger guys are having to step up and play some big minutes in big-time situations. And we just saw it against Kansas State last night. They just didn't quite have the toughness, mentally to climb back in that game, take the lead, and then just start to take it over.
Right.
But, Kansas State is a really good team. I mean, they're, I think, 16-5. They're right outside the top 25. So it's not a terrible loss. It's just really surprising to see Kansas at 6-4 in the Big 12.
Right. Your guy, Zion Williams, had a interesting dunk last night that didn't go through. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was, Boston College did a pretty good job of not letting Duke get out in transition and not letting the crowd really get in the game. And so I think when Zion had that chance, he thought he was really going to get the crowd going. But, I mean, I heard a stat on the broadcast last night. He's the only player in the country with 40 blocks, 40 steals, and 40 dunks. So, I mean, he's unbelievable. He's so efficient when he gets the ball. He doesn't take bad shots. He works hard on the rebounding. So, I mean, he's everything that you want him to be from a talent-wise, but just who he is as a teammate and the little things like his hustle and the way he plays defense. I really think his stock, I know it was high when the season started, but I think it's really blown up just because of all the little things he does so well and takes so seriously.
Mm-hmm. Just thought we had to do a little Zion Williams segment because of the way that ESPN's been all over this kid, so I'm just like, might as well talk about him and have his own segment in this conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one thing, as much as he is covered by ESPN and every other media outlet, he's very humble. He doesn't really like talking about himself. I think he really likes that he's on a team with 3 other superstars, so that it doesn't have to be about him all the time, even though they try to make it about him. He really just wants it to be a team aspect. He really just wants to win. And I think, he knows that he's the best player in the country, so he doesn't really need to overstate it. He just needs to do what he can to make his year in college memorable.
Right. Now, speaking of Duke and transitioning, let's just go conference by conference, or the major conferences through the main players here in this region of the country in college basketball. And first, starting out in the ACC, like you alluded to, that this is a big Saturday for college basketball, and the headliner game where College Game Day is going to be at is at Virginia and Duke, the rematch. And I just want to know from you, Ned, if Duke happens to get this win, do you think this would flip the conference standings? Because right now, Virginia is at 1 in the conference, and Duke is at 2 with the same record of 8-1 in the conference?
It's tough for Duke to say that they would really take control because they do still have to play Carolina 2 more times, and they also have Louisville, who's 8-2 in the conference ahead of them. So, Duke definitely still has a tough road ahead of them. This win would be huge because, it would, one, give them the sweep over Virginia, which would be great for standings come NCAA tournament time, but also just for getting that 1 seed in the ACC tournament. Right now, when you look at the ACC, it feels like a 3-team race with Virginia, Duke, Carolina. They're all 8-1. And then Louisville's 8-2, kind of right behind them. Louisville split with North Carolina, and they've got to play Duke next Tuesday, I believe. So Louisville's got a chance to get themselves back in it. But it really feels like it's Virginia, Duke, and North Carolina to get 1, 2, 3 in that conference. That next tier is Virginia Tech, Syracuse. They're both 7-3. Obviously, talent. But both those teams have been pretty inconsistent this year. And I just think Virginia, Duke, and North Carolina have been so consistent. I think Louisville's getting much more consistent the more they're playing for Chris Mack, who's done a fantastic job coaching there.
Do you feel like any of the bottom feeders of this conference, like Notre Dame, Boston College, maybe Miami, could possibly take over and steal the show when it comes to the ACC tournament?
Notre Dame, if they get some of their guys back who are out, could definitely make a run. Mike Bray's a fantastic coach for them. Has won in a lot of different ways. Pittsburgh under first-year head coach Jeff Capel, they're 2-8 in the conference, and that's not great. But they were 10-3 coming into conference play. So they're a good team. They're really young, but they have 2 stud freshman guards who, if those guys combined for 50 points in a game could definitely win. Otherwise not really. Wake Forest is pretty down. Miami, they're 1-8. It feels like they're better than that, but I would say Pittsburgh just because sometimes guards can take over tournament-type games and go on tournament runs, playing well for 2 or 3, 4 games in a row. But it really feels like it's, the top 6 or 8 are kind of going to dominate once the tournament gets here.
Uh-huh. Who would you say right now is the dark horse in the ACC?
I would probably say Syracuse. Boeheim, obviously, a fantastic track record coaching, getting to Final Fours, won a national championship. And that zone defense is so hard to prepare for, especially in a conference tournament setting where you only have, sometimes 8 to 12 hours to prepare for the next team you're going to play. So if you're not prepared, you haven't seen a lot of zone, your zone offense isn't really, where it needs to be. It can be tough to beat Syracuse, and they got a guard named Tyus Battle who can light up the scoreboard and take over a game whenever he needs.
Mm-hmm. What would you say to North Carolina Tar Heel fans right now who probably are a little bit frustrated with the way their season's going, but it always looks like with Roy Williams recently that it's like they have a chance to take control of their season the rest of the way?
Yeah, I would tell UNC fans to be excited, be optimistic. They're playing really well right now. Cameron Johnson and Kobe White, 2 freshmen, are combining for 30 points a game. And then Luke May, obviously, hit that big game winner 2 years ago, All-American forward. And then they're getting good supporting roles from Nasir Little, who's really figured it out the last couple of weeks. Kenny Williams, a veteran guard. So, I'm as a guy who cheers for Duke, North Carolina makes me a little nervous for sure.
Do you think that they're good enough to beat Virginia and Duke down the stretch?
I think they can beat Duke because those teams play similar games. They like to get up and down. It's going to be a high-scoring game. If one team's shooting the ball better, they've got that advantage. Virginia's a lot tougher to beat because you're going to have to play their style, and it's very opposite of UNC. Virginia's last in shots or possessions per game in the entire country, but they run their sets really well and they play really good defense, and they make you, use 20 seconds of the shot clock before you get a shot up on offense. So, North Carolina has the talent to beat Virginia, no doubt, but I definitely think it's a little bit easier of a win and game plan against Duke than Virginia for the Tar Heels.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk about the local ACC team in Georgia Tech, and recently they've kind of been they've been backsliding a little bit with a record of 500 at 11-11. What's going on, Ned?
I wish I had a good answer. They've lost 3 in a row, and all 3 of those teams are ranked teams: Duke, UNC, North Carolina, or Duke, UNC, and Florida State. So those are tough, and the back end of their schedule is much easier than Virginia. I mean, they've still got to play Virginia and Virginia Tech, but they've got Pittsburgh, Miami, Boston College. They play Clemson tonight. So they can get back on track. We had kind of said if they could get to 8-8 in the conference, that they'd be in a decent spot. Right now they're 3-6. So, it'd be tough. You kind of expect them to lose to Virginia. They played Virginia Tech well, so who knows if they'll play them well again, or if Virginia Tech will be ready to whoop some butt. Georgia Tech's kind of got to figure it out. Alvarado hasn't been playing as well recently, and he's kind of what stirs the drink for the Yellow Jackets.
Right. He's pretty much the one-man show. They're down on the flats, but they have an interesting stretch of games where they have to play Clemson tonight, and then they go to Notre Dame, and then they play Virginia Tech. All of those could be possibly 3 losses right there. At the same time, they also look like winnable games. How do you feel like this stretch could shake out for them?
Yeah, I think you need to win tonight against Clemson at home. Clemson's down a little bit this year. It's definitely a winnable game for Georgia Tech. So I think you need this win to get back on track. Then you go to Notre Dame. We talked about they've got some injuries. If they're still losing missing some guys, that's a good chance for you. And then, that Virginia Tech game is a little bit of a telltale story for the season. How you had a chance to beat them earlier in the year. You couldn't execute late. Can you bounce back and go pick up a big road win and try to turn your season around? So, this is a big 3-game stretch for them over the next week.
Now, do you feel like the ACC is still the toughest conference in college basketball, or has the changing of the guard occurred?
I still think it's up there. I think the Big Ten is really good this year. And even the Big East has some really good teams like Marquette, St. John's, and Villanova. But I think when you look at the top, 4 or 5 teams of the ACC, you're going to take those top 4 or 5 against most conferences, top 4 or 5. So I think maybe the depth of strength of the conference is down a little bit this year. But I think the top 5 or 6 are still, awesome teams and can make a Sweet 16 run or further in the tournament.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, switching over to because Atlanta's the crossroads of the ACC and SEC, let's talk about the Southeastern Conference, because probably for the first time in a long time, you have a number 1 team like Tennessee, then you have Kentucky at number 5, and then you have the LSU Tigers at 21. So it's usually Kentucky is usually the ranked team, or if you have another couple ranked teams, they're usually in the teens or in the 20s.
Yeah, the top 2 teams, the SEC feels like a 2-team race between Tennessee and Kentucky, and they play each other next Saturday for the first time at Kentucky, and then there'll be a return trip to Tennessee later in the year. So those 2 teams still have to play each other twice. So we'll see kind of where it ends up. Tennessee's undefeated right now. Kentucky has 1 loss in the conference. The sleeper is LSU. They're ranked 21. They're 7-1 in the conference. But they got to play tonight at Mississippi State, who's a pretty good team, and they still have to play Kentucky, Tennessee, and Auburn. So LSU's put themselves in a really good spot through 8 games, but they're tough stretch of games ahead of them, and I think we'll really find out who LSU as a team. Tennessee and Kentucky, they're going to be top 2 seeds in the tournament. They're playing really well. Kentucky's won 9 straight, and Tennessee's won 17 straight. So they're playing really well this time of year, and I don't see them really falling off. Auburn has been inconsistent. They're 5-4 in the conference, but 16-6, overall. So I still think they're a sleeper. I think 4 losses is going to be too many to get them, the SEC championship. But I still think Auburn is going to be a tough matchup for any team that plays them.
Now, with Auburn, what do you feel like happened with Auburn? Because Auburn was one of those teams that had a really good season last year during the regular season, and then they lost in the first round of the national tournament. And it seemed like they were still riding on their momentum from last year.
And they started off really hot, and they were playing well, and then they had that 2-point loss at home against Kentucky in a game where they had a chance to make a layup with under 3 seconds left to win the game, and then they lost 2 more after that Kentucky game. So I think they kind of let that Kentucky game sat with them for about a week, and it affected their play for the 2 games following that. But they're getting back on track. They're scoring the ball well. They're going to rely on their guards, Bryce Brown and Jared Harper. So if those guys are having off nights, it's going to be tough for them. But when those guys are on, and they usually are, at least one of them, Auburn can play with anybody and certainly score with anybody.
Now, Alabama seems like they're the dark horse of the ACC. Are there any other teams like Alabama that could upset someone? Because they upset Kentucky at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, Alabama's really good. They've got John Petty, who's their good shooting guard, and then their big man. I'm totally blanking on his name, but he's really good. Hall is his last name.
Gotcha.
But he's really good inside. So, Alabama's a tough matchup. I don't really see them doing a ton come tournament time. But they're a team that plays hard. Avery Johnson's a really good coach. That they're experienced. They've got a lot of guys who've been there for a couple of years. So it's always a tough matchup. And I think Mississippi State, Ole Miss are 2 other teams that with Alabama, all those teams are 4-4 in the conference, and it kind of feels like any of them could break out and end up going 11-5 in the conference and giving themselves a good chance come when it comes to tournament seeding.
Right. It seems like Florida's that it's a different season from last year because Florida had put together a really good season. Now they're kind of backsliding on having a record of 4-5.
Florida's been kind of a mystery. Mike White is a really good coach over there. He did an awesome job last year. Last year they played with 4 guards and 1 big man. And I think this year that they're more of a traditional, 2 guards, a wing, and a couple bigs. And I think just the style of play, either, they don't play it as well or it's easier to defend for teams instead of having 4 guards where there's matchups all over the court for the Florida offense. So I think that's part of it, but definitely surprised to see them, 10-12 or 12-10 overall.
Yeah, definitely a big surprise. Again, with the Georgia Bulldogs, they seem to keep games close, but somehow just can't finish, and it just seems like this is just what you get when you have a new head coach.
Yeah, that's all I would really chalk Georgia up to is new coach, new system. Like you said, they're in every game. They continue to play hard despite their record. Only 1 win in the conference. So, I don't think there's a ton coming out of the season for Georgia. The only good they return a lot of guys. When you look at the seniors on this year's team, very few of them play a lot of minutes. Derek, I'm going to mess his last name up, Ogbidi, he's a big man who is a senior who plays a lot. But otherwise, seniors on their roster don't get a lot of time on the floor. When you look at their stars, it's Claxton, who's a sophomore. It's Hammond, who's a sophomore. Crump, who's their 3-point specialist, is a junior. And they've got some freshmen like Ty Fagan and JoJo Toppin, who are Georgia boys, who are getting on the floor a little bit, but I think they're going to really take off in their second year in a full off season with Coach Crean.
Let me ask you.
I almost said Coach Fox there.
Let me ask you this. Just from analyzing the game, that it seems like with Georgia, if you've watched them recently, that they got some guys like Josh Smith, former Atlanta Hawks player, who would always go for threes and who would always miss. And it seems like on Georgia offensively this year, that they always have a lot of guys doing that. And I guess that I'm just thinking, hey, that's just part of the system. That's what Tom Crean wants and everything like that. Once they get that offense clicking, do you think that that could be pretty deadly?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Crean had some really, really good teams at Indiana. I mean, he went to multiple Sweet 16s with them. Couldn't really get past the Sweet 16, which ultimately I think is why they decided to go a different direction. But I think you talk about sometimes Georgia's shooting a lot of threes, and that can be one because you just can't get to the lane.
Right,
but a lot of times it's because you don't have an identity as a team, and that's a big thing when you look at the really good teams. They all have an identity. What do they do well? We talk about UNC. They want to get out and run in transition. We talk about Virginia. They want to slow the game down, right? Kentucky is going to run in the first half, and they're going to slow things down with the lead in the second half. So all the really good teams have an identity. They know what they do well. And I think Georgia's only true identity this year is they play hard. And while that's a great identity to have, when you get in the last 4 or 5 minutes of a game and you need some buckets, you need some defensive stops, if you don't have an offense and defensive identity, there's just no consistency to your play.
If you, maybe this might sound dumb, or I'm just going to throw this question out there. If you're shooting threes majority of the time, like the Golden State Warriors, but you're not making them, isn't it going to be hard to get rebounds?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on how you play, because, traditionally speaking, if you're shooting threes, you're going to have longer rebounds, right? They're going to hit the rim and bounce off further back. So if you have, like, a bunch of small guards or a lot of wings, you can shoot the three and give yourself a lot of chance of offensive rebounds. If you've got a bunch of bigs in there who, when the shot goes up, they all go down to the paint or to the block and start boxing out, and then the ball's bouncing off the rim over their heads and the other team's grabbing rebounds, that can definitely be a factor. So, that's what I would say for that. But I don't know if that's the best answer, but that's just kind of how I would answer that.
Well, you're a coach, and I was looking for a little bit of a coach answer, so I think you gave it to me. So, now I just want to go back to Tennessee real quick because I actually saw something interesting on Facebook. I think it was through the SEC network where they showed Admiral Schofield playing guitar and singing, and he actually sounded pretty decent too. So I just want to know from you, as a dynamic player that he is, do you think that he's going to be up for the Wooden Award?
I think he could be. The problem is he plays with Grant Williams, who is averaging a few more points and a few more rebounds than him. So I think, when you look at that, if they're going to give it to the best player on the best team, Williams is going to get the nod over Schofield. But I just think that's really interesting that, SEC Network talks about, him playing the guitar. And you see that a lot with these guys who stay 4 years. They really become like complete students, complete people, and they just kind of have time to do some more stuff like that. I mean, these guys who are one and done. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you can go play 1 year in college and go make millions of dollars, do it. I mean, I'm not saying for a second those guys should stay longer. But the guys who do, I mean, there's some really cool stuff that they get the opportunity to do, and a lot of them stay in the summer for workouts and get ahead on classes. So, that you've got time to learn the guitar because you're only taking minimum classes each semester because you're going 3 semesters instead of 2 semesters like normal students. So I just think that's some cool stuff. And you see a lot of these veteran teams like Tennessee, like Virginia, like Villanova in the past. They have a lot of success with guys who, have kind of seen a lot of things and done a lot of things over their 4 years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Come tournament time, how dangerous do you think Kentucky might be?
Dangerous. They last night Ashton Hagen kind of had his worst game of the year. He had 5 or 6 turnovers. But I mean, Tyler Hero has really stepped up as he's a freshman wing player, can score the ball a lot of different ways. Inside the Stanford transfer, who's a senior, Reed Travis, has been really good, and then P.J. Washington inside as well has been really good. So, I think Kentucky had a lot of question marks coming into the year. They had a lot of spots they needed to plug in, but they brought in guys who are not only talented but work really hard. And so, like I said, I mean, there's no reason they can't beat Tennessee once or twice and be the 1 seed in the SEC champs.
Gotcha. Transitioning over to the Big Ten, on the other side of the country, you have a lot of ranked teams in this conference, and I don't want to spend too much time on here, but out of Maryland, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Purdue, and Michigan, who do you which of those teams do you think could possibly have a good run come the national tournament time?
It's tough to decide between Michigan and Michigan State, even with that Michigan State loss last night. Both those teams are really good. They have scoring on multiple levels. Michigan has 2 really good guards, Matthews and Poole, and they've linked up with the freshman Iggy Brazdeikis, who's averaging almost 16 points per game. So Michigan can score a lot of different ways, and same with Michigan State. I mean, if Cash and Winston doesn't turn the ball over 9 times last night, they probably win that game. And then inside, Michigan State has Nick Ward and Kenny Goins, and Goins is a guy who can pick and pop and shoot the 3 ball well. Matt McQuaid from Michigan State starting to come on. So I would say those are the top 2 teams. Purdue's pretty good. They've got good big men. They rely a lot on one scorer to do the scoring for them. So that's kind of hit or miss. If he's playing well, he's a guard who shoots the 3 ball a lot. And then Wisconsin, Ethan Happ is a Player of the Year candidate. Demetric Trice is good. Braxton Davison has been playing really well recently, and Wisconsin's a team who's they kind of play like Virginia. They're going to slow things down, and if you get in the tournament and they get a 5 or 10 point lead in the second half, it's going to be tough to come back on them. So I would say those are the 3 teams. Maryland is getting there. They're still a little bit off. Iowa, I just don't think has enough scoring. I think Minnesota is a little bit of a sleeper. Pitino's son is coaching there. They've got a guard, Amir Coffey, lefty scorer, who's really good. He can score a lot of ways. So kind of look at Minnesota as a sleeper in that group and kind of the team that's not ranked in the top 25 right now in the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of another conference that starts with big, the Big 12, the weird thing about it is you have Kansas State leading this pack, and they're at 7-2 on the conference, 17-5 overall. Then you have Baylor at 6-2, 15-6 overall, and none of those teams are ranked. But the teams that are ranked are Iowa State sitting at 3rd, Kansas sitting at 13, Texas Tech at 16 in the nation. But I'm assuming that Kansas ranking is going to change probably after Saturday.
Yeah, it will, and as long as Kansas State wins this weekend, they'll be back in the top 25. Maybe even in the top 20 with that win on the road at Kansas last night. The Big 12, I think, it kind of is beating itself up. We talked about the ACC being the best conference, and I like I said, I think it is. I think the Big 12 is a little more conference where anybody could beat anybody on any given day. I mean, West Virginia's in last place, but with Bob Huggins and the way those guys press and the way they play hard, I mean, they could beat anybody on any given day. Oklahoma, I mean, they're 3-7, but they're 15-8 overall. I mean, they're pretty good. Oklahoma State, they've got a lot of injuries. They're probably the toughest team in the league. And then TCU and Texas are very good teams. I think a lot of the rankings are, when you look at their overall records, a lot of the Big 12 teams did really well out of conference. And so I think that's kind of these rankings are still kind of hanging over because, we've played 8 conference games, but everyone's played 12 out-of-conference games. So I think as the conference games, you start having more conference games and out-of-conference games, the rankings become, maybe a little more realistic. Just kind of like college football. A lot of people in college basketball think no ranking should come out until, a month into the season or whatever because, there's a lot of biases from the preseason.
Yeah. Yeah, that preseason always sets the tone for everything.
Yeah, and like sometimes you'll be the team that's ranked 15th in the preseason, and then that goes down to the top 25 win, and then at the end of the year they're not even 500. So
Right.
It is what it is, but I think that would kind of answer your rankings question.
Gotcha. It's those mind games that that the man plays on you. Speaking of other conferences too, we got the American that only has two ranked teams with Houston and Cincinnati. Do you feel like one of those teams could get a decent seeding come national tournament time?
Definitely Houston. I finally had a chance to watch them last weekend, and they're really good. They've got some guards who can score a variety of ways. Whoever they were playing got it close a couple times, and then Houston just took over and extended the lead back out to 8 or 10. So I think Houston's kind of the cream of the crop in this league. Cincinnati, I think this league probably gets at least two teams. So I think, Cincinnati would be the next team. But I feel like UCF and Temple. I still think they're two teams that could go on a run. I don't know if they have maybe the national respect or the resume to get into the tournament. But I think, UCF or Temple could go on a run in the AAC tournament and get themselves a tournament bid, which would maybe leave out Cincinnati if they don't keep playing well.
Do you feel like Memphis is just in a rebuilding year?
Yeah, they just don't have it quite yet. Next year when they get the number one recruit, I think they'll really explode on the scene. And again, I think there is something to be said for having a full off season with the coach, kind of like we talked about with Georgia, that Memphis will get with Penny Hardaway.
Now, in the Big East, which
that's a good conference.
Yes. In football, I used to call it the Big Easy. You have Villanova that, out of all those teams, probably could make a run at the national championship if things go their way. You also have Marquette, even though they lost last night. But you have St. John's that took on Duke. You also have Georgetown. Or like the two other teams that I feel like are just kind of waiting in the wings there.
Villanova is definitely the team right now. They've won 10 straight since they lost to Kansas. They're 18-4. Their star guard is Phil Booth. He's averaging almost 20 a game. And they get good support. And Colin Gillespie had a big game for them on Saturday. I think with Villanova and Marquette, the thing that allows them to make a big tournament run is they kind of have a big three, if you will. For Villanova, it's Booth, it's Pascal, who's the big man, and then Colin Gillespie. For Marquette, it's Marcus Howard, who averages almost 25 a game, and then Sam and Joey Hauser, who play their roles well, and then other guys chip in when they need. So both those teams, really could make a Sweet 16 Elite 8 run. I think Marquette maybe a little bit inexperienced to go all the way to the Final Four. Still not a young team, but maybe just an inexperienced team is the better way to put them. Villanova's got all the experience in the world, having won 2 of the last 3 championships. St. John's, I think, could come out of there. I talk about Pons. I think he's kind of the way the tournament looked at Trae Young and Colin Sexton last year, where, if you're good enough to get your team on the bubble, let's put them in and see if, their star player can't win a couple games for them in the tournament. And then Georgetown and Creighton, they got a lot of work to do. They'd have to really win out most of their regular season games or win the Big East tournament. But Georgetown under under Patrick Ewing is starting to play some good basketball.
Gotcha. Now, just convince us why we should be watching college basketball all day on Saturday.
Why we should be watching college basketball
because
on Saturday?
Football is totally over.
Yeah. I guess the American Alliance Football League or something starts. But the reason you should watch college basketball all day is because you want to be ready to go for the 6:00 Duke Virginia tip, and that's the big one. We talked about it. I won't go into too much detail, but it starts. The noon is Wisconsin at Michigan, and Michigan lost to Wisconsin for their only conference loss earlier in the year. So that's a little bit of a revenge game for them. Kentucky going to play at Mississippi State. I mentioned LSU's got to play at Mississippi State tonight. That's a tough place. Minnesota, Michigan State will be a good one. And then Villanova Marquette is at 2:30. So that's going to be really big in determining the Big East and who's going to kind of take control of that conference. And then I'd say for SEC fans, one to keep an eye on is Auburn LSU. Kind of see which one of those teams says, all right, I'm the third team in the conference behind Kentucky and Tennessee. And my last one would be Louisville and Florida State. Again, that's kind of a battle for who's going to be that fourth team coming out of the ACC to start that tournament. So a lot of really good games kind of throughout the day. You don't have to wait till late to get good games. We got them at noon, 2:30, 4 o'clock, and then that Duke Virginia one, 6 o'clock. That's the big one.
Now, it seems like just all over the board that for all the teams that we're pretty much at a place right now that it's conference championships games all the way till when the first tournaments start. So who do you think, just off the top of your head, who do you think is going to benefit from playing conference games all the way till when the tournaments start?
I think LSU and Auburn are two teams. I think right now they're probably both tournament teams, but I think if one of them really turns it on, they could find themselves as a top 4 seed. I think Auburn has a little more talent than LSU, but I think LSU may be a little bit more team oriented. So I would say those two teams are really going to benefit from it. And then again, Florida State, Louisville playing each other this weekend. Both those teams have a chance to play themselves into maybe even a top 3 seed if they can go on a run and find a win over Duke, North Carolina, or Virginia, give themselves a true statement win. I know Louisville already has that win over UNC. If they could beat Duke next week, they'd find themselves potentially right back in the top 10. So I think a lot of those kind of middle tier teams we talked about, even in the American Conference, like a Temple, if they can knock off those teams ahead of them and give themselves a kind of solid spot in the NCAA tournament, that would help them. But yeah, like you said, we got a month left of conference play, and then conference tournament comes on. I think a lot of times what you do in the regular season carries more weight than what you do in a 4-day tournament. So we'll see who can take advantage and go on a nice winning streak, or at least win, 7 of their last 9.
Well, thank you, Ned, for coming on the show. Where can we reach you at on social media?
You can find me at The Real Ned Kaish on Twitter. I'm always talking college hoops. I had a very fun time making fun of NC State for scoring 24 total points in a game last Saturday.
Oh, wow.
That included 10 total points in the second half. So yeah, I like to have some fun with it. I just thought I'd give NC State a shout out because that was, it was actually impressive more so than embarrassing to score 24 points in an entire college basketball game for a team that was ranked in the top 25 at the time.
So is it safe to say that you live tweet on Saturdays?
I would. I would say I'm more of a smash the retweet button than come up with my own creative thoughts.
Gotcha. Well, just trying to find ways that the listeners can, follow you and see what you got going on. So,
awesome.
All right.
Well, appreciate you having me, Alex, and we'll talk some hoops next week and moving forward.
Yeah, we will. Should be an interesting. Should be interesting time, and I'm assuming with these conference standings that there's going to be a lot of reshuffling going on, especially with all the action that's going on this Saturday.
Yeah, no doubt. Turn on that TV, set the recording if you need, but we got great hoops all Saturday.
All right. So we got some breaking news, some really good news if you're a Georgia fan. You probably already know this right now, but Brett Seiler has committed to the University of Georgia, the tight end out of Clearwater, Florida, and this is something that Georgia needed, and this is what Kirby Smart takes care of. He takes care of his needs. That's what Nick Saban does. That's what Dabo Swinney does. And one of our needs was some depth at the tight end position. So getting Brett Seiler is big for the future of the tight end position at the University of Georgia. So that's another need that's taken care of, and he's one of the kids that actually he visited on his helicopter ride because he does a lot of helicoptering around town and around the areas that he's recruiting. So he took a helicopter ride to Brett Seiler's high school and landed there at Clearwater, Florida. So that's he always reels in those guys that he goes to see via helicopter. I guess that helicopter is a very powerful tool that Kirby has to his disposal. Also, on the other side of this, Georgia Tech gets a really big recruit, and especially because Jeff Collins is going to want to establish the run and want to try to run the ball. He gets a 4-star running back who was all-region in 5A from Rome, Georgia, Jamios Griffin. So Jeff Collins taking care of some of his needs because he's going to need some. Also, too, he's going to need some depth at that running back position, and I think Jamios, you're going to see him on the flats early and often, especially in his freshman year. So huge pickup by Jeff Collins. Now, this is the part of the show where we need your help because we're trying to expand our audience. And if you enjoyed this podcast and like that we were a different flavor than Sports Talk Radio, well, subscribe. And you can subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. If it was on Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, be sure to hit the subscribe button if you want to hear more from the ATL Box Score. Also, too, it helps us out because it helps us grow an audience, and that's exactly what we want to do here. We want to have more of a reach, so that's a way that you can get this awesome podcast and at the same time help us out without even realizing. Also, too, another way to help us out without even realizing is hitting the like button wherever you see this. We're on social media. We're like I said, we're on iTunes, Google Play, so wherever you see that like button, just be able to hit it because that helps out. That helps us out in more ways than one. And then, if you want to, tell us your thoughts on what you thought of National Signing Day, what you think of Villanova, North Carolina, Duke, what's going on with college basketball, or if you saw that video of Admiral Schofield on the guitar. Be sure to put that in the comment section because we want to hear from you guys. We want to hear your thoughts on the show and what you thought. But again, thanks to Ned Kaish for coming on the show. Thanks to Steve Choi for always joining us and making this podcast a whole lot more colorful than it is right now. So thanks, guys. This is episode 26 is out.